Hi, everyone. So before we get started, sorry about that delay earlier. I'm not sure why my computer wasn't playing nice with everything, but we're ready to get started, and hopefully we don't run over time. So what I'm going to be doing during this little workshop is a high-level overview of the BitDAO performance bonds, which is like a sort of subset of Dao Tooling that we came up with in order to sort of improve the proposal process to reduce counterparty risk for DAOs. So yeah, let's talk DAO tooling. Like, how familiar are people in here with DAOs? Who's heard of a DAO? Who's interacted with one? So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. There's like many levels of it. It could be a bunch of people in our group chat who've just decided that they want to share like control of a multi-sig, to like multi-thousand user organizations that have token staked voting, where they make decisions over like treasuries that are worth hundreds or even billions of dollars. Before we get started over here, if you guys want to pull out your laptops and just open up this repo, we're going to be doing a little code walkthrough of what we've got over there later on. But yeah, before we get started, if there's anyone not familiar with what a DAO is, anyone have any additional questions on what exactly a DAO is? Yeah.
Basically a community that has voting rights
Yeah.
on how to use the funds that are available.
Yeah, basically. It's like a co-op, but we've brought it on chain. So it's like fully transparent, like who's voted for what, and so on and so forth, and why things have or have not passed. I'm going to leave this up for like 30 more seconds, and that should be good. Okay, if you guys are already familiar with DAOs, you're probably familiar with what the voting process sort of looks like for the majority of DAOs these days. So typically you'll have like an initial proposal thing on a forum like Discourse, right? And then they'll use some sort of combination of the Gnosis Safe, like SafeSnap plugin, and Snapshot in order to sort of push proposals in order to move funds on chain, interact with contracts on chain with the DAO multi-sig. Are any of you unfamiliar with any of these platforms? So like our existing process is sort of like people can go and propose something on our Discourse forum, write up a proposal being like, oh, hey, I want X bit in return for these deliverables, right? If it receives enough interest on it, we then take it to a vote on our Snapshot forum, if that makes sense. And if it passes the vote on our Snapshot forum, what ends up happening is we then allow execution via our Gnosis Safe to transfer funds over. So basically, what's the problem with this process? So we basically, at BitDAO, we want to fund projects and associated entities to grow sort of the Bit ecosystem, but you sort of face counterparty risk when doing so, right? So let's say that someone puts a proposal in and they're like, you know, I'm going to build a house. I want 10,000 bit or something like that. It's going to be like a charity or something like that. Once you release the funds to them, there is no way to sort of guarantee these funds. They can rug pull you fairly easily, right? They can just simply be like, oh, screw you, I'm not going to build this. I'm just going to take the funds and run. And we've seen cases of this before through malicious proposals on other DAOs. Yeah. The solution that we sort of came up to this was performance bonds. So basically, we're trying to implement a performance bond process wherein folks are required to stake some sort of collateral into our proposal process. This sort of helps solve this problem by providing an economic guarantee for the DAO itself. We're locking this collateral into an intermediary contract that can be slashed if certain goals are not met. So we're going to come up with a cute example here. We have Blimp DAO. Let's say there's only like 7 blimps in the world. So this is kind of a high-risk venture. Let's say that this DAO comes to us and they're like, you know, we want to buy one of those 7 blimps. And we want 100K bit to buy one of these blimps. With a performance bond in place, what we'd effectively do, the BitDAO community members can request that the Blimp DAO community members post about 100 ETH in collateral before releasing the funds if the proposal passes. And then there's 2 possible outcomes to this. Either Blimp DAO would buy a blimp and the 100 ETH in collateral is returned, or Blimp DAO fails to buy the blimp and 100 ETH is about recouped by the DAO itself. And sort of, yeah, do you have a question?
I'm trying to picture this. So basically what you're saying is that if this company makes a proposal to buy the
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that I understand that basically if they don't do it, then the DAO recuperates the collateral. But what
Yeah.
was the initial
So for Blimp DAO, because their initial condition for success was, wanting to buy a blimp, there are only two states for this. Either you successfully have bought a blimp, or you have not successfully bought a blimp. Obviously, can be like multiple tiers to this. Yeah. Oh, so collateral can be staked. So the contracts that I'm going to be walking through later, they're effectively like middleman contracts that you're able to post collateral into that can be slashed by like guarantors or individuals from the DAO if certain criteria are not met. But we're going to be walking through the contract for that shortly. Yeah. So like why did we choose performance bonds in this particular context? Basically, it's because it increases community engagement in proposals. It's forcing like the other entities community to participate within it because obviously who else is going to be posting collateral for this, right? It sort of formalizes on versus off-chain interactions. It imposes basically consequences, like I mentioned before, on rug pull-like behavior. And it's a good vehicle for DAO co-investments, basically. So let's say that one DAO wants to invest in another DAO who's building some sort of tooling. The other DAO can fund the performance bond completely from their own treasury to sort of formalize the agreement together, right? So I'm going to be doing like a really quick code walkthrough as well of the contracts themselves, if you were able to pull that up. Yeah. So this is the like Wind Ranger Treasury thing. This is where we keep most of our DAO tooling and treasury-related tooling code and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be walking you guys through a pretty simple like single collateral multi-reward bond, right? So this is a bond where you can stake in some sort of ERC20 collateral and then receive some arbitrary set of ERC20 tokens or something as rewards or redeem from that particular bond itself. So everything is fairly permissioned by sort of like other members of our DAO itself. You can see that we have like obviously a deposit function over here where people are able to stake sort of a claim within this DAO, within this reward bond itself. There is a sort of particular lockup period that they have to deposit their funds to this bond during, or else they won't be able to like meet the rewards, yeah. Which is all sort of set during the initialization. So we pass in like sort of metadata like describing the bond that's sort of on chain. We're passing in settings to sort of govern like the parameters of the DAO on chain, like on the initialization. Oh, is it hard to read? I'm really sorry. Is this better? Yeah. And we're basically able to like init this, right? That's just like the basic deposit contract. We also have a time lock multi-reward one. So this is what we, no pictures, please. Thank you. It's not great. Sorry. We also have a like a reward contract that people will be able to have their rewards deposited into and redeemed afterwards if the bond actually does succeed in this particular context. That maps and is tied to a particular bond deposit contract, right? So basically, it's pretty simple. So we have like a mapping of the claimant itself, so the person who deposited, or the guarantor who deposited funds into the original bond contract, to their reward pool debt ratio, which is just an integer representing like the amount or like the ratio of the tokens that they had within the initial pool. And we have a like individual reward pools, so the tokens that they will be eligible to like sort of withdraw from, and a redemption timestamp over here, which is like the point at which we know that like if the bond has not been slashed, they should be able to redeem sort of all of their collateral. So yeah, basically sort of once funds are available, so when the redemption timestamp sort of is set and it has passed, you're sort of able to iterate over and collect any of the arbitrary ERC20 token rewards or like initial stake that you've deposited within these, and the time lock has sort of expired, and so on and so forth. It's like a pretty simple like single pool style solution for these things. It's pretty similar to I would even call it like staking reward management. It's just allowing for like a one-to-many sort of redemption pool that we have over here. yeah, so you can see how we sort of calculate the reward debt over here as well after like the redemption and the corresponding lockup period. So you can have your claimant, like the debt tokens that they were issued upon them staking within our bond, and the total supply of it. It's just basically a very simple, like they're owned like a portion of the rewards pool depending on how much they deposited originally, and yeah, it's pretty standard over here. Yeah, something that we do find I do find a bit more interesting within this is like the permissioning system that we have in place. So if we step out a little bit, we also have pretty cool like role access control, like on a DAO level for who is able to sort of control each of these pools and so on and so forth. Because we're basically deploying these pools on like, sort of like a per DAO basis. So I'm actually going to go into one of the contracts where we store all of these roles, which is in the roles contract over here. So we have like the DAO admin and the DAO creators who are able to be deploying these bonds and manage the admin functions such as setting timestamps and so on and so forth within them. We have DAO meeple, which is like typical DAO users who are then able to like interact and maybe like stake and claim guarantors. We have the super user, which obviously has sort of all permissions within it. And then we have a system admin who is sort of able to set pause and unpause contracts in sort of in case of emergency. I can sort of show you guys how that ties into our bond contracts over here. If we take a look at not the bond creator contract, it is in the, yeah, sort of like bond factory and bond mediator contracts. So effectively, we're not, these all inherit from the role access control document over here. And what ends up happening is that you're unable to create bonds for particular DAOs unless you are, unless you have the role for a particular DAO. So we have a cool encoding system where you might have like a unique DAO ID linked to like a particular address, and roles for those particular addresses unique to that particular DAO. And because we might have multiple entities or multiple other DAOs as sort of counterparties to like our on-chain on-chain like investments and so on and so forth. We want to make sure that only those counterparties sort of have access to creating these bond and like staking sort of contracts, right? So we basically have independent factories for each of these individual things, and only the admin folks from each of these DAOs are able to deploy both like the rewards and fund the rewards and like create individual bonds sort of for each of them. Yeah, I guess that's sort of a high-level overview of what the bond sort of does and what it is. And I'm curious if people sort of have questions about a little bit, like a few more questions about what exactly their use case is or like the implementation details themselves. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, we also have like interfaces for like what a typical single collateral bond would look like, where you're just depositing like some arbitrary ERC20 as collateral. Again, the functions are fairly standard when it comes to things like this. You're able to deposit a certain amount of collateral, redeem a certain amount of collateral. An interesting parameter of Ethereum is that there's no like floating point math, right? So when you are like redeeming your collateral, like based on the ratio of what you deposited in, there'll always be like trace amounts of dust tokens left within it. So we also have like a sweep ERC20 thing to remove all the remaining tokens into it and back into the original DAO treasury so that we're not leaving dust tokens on contracts all over the chain. Yeah. I guess I can also talk about sort of the slashing mechanism over here. So like, remember when I mentioned in the Blimp DAO example, if they don't meet their particular like goal, like being able to buy a Blimp versus not being able to buy a Blimp, we have like an implementation of a slash function where you're able to enact a penalty for the individuals who stake their funds within that bond collateral contract, which just allows for a super user or a DAO admin to basically call out the amount that they're slashing from it, and having to put in like a string for the reason and do it on chain, if that makes sense. And this would just sweep the amount of tokens or like the collateral from that particular bond back into the DAO who's put up the collateral's treasury, if that makes sense. Yeah, I guess, do people have any other questions about like how this improves the proposal flow, or I guess sort of other tooling within the our ecosystem? Yeah. High risk of regulation for this system. The bond sort of payment system. So I like to sort of think of them as like a formalization of a contract on chain. So basically, this is just sort of a method of posting up some sort of like collateral. This often happens like off chain, right? Where you might be trusting some sort of middleman otherwise. It's just that this is sort of happening in a much more like transparent and regulated sort of way. I think maybe in the States, the DAO bond tokens, or like the debt tokens that you receive as a part of the bond, because it can be redeemed for things, that might cause some issues. But I think that in more DAO-friendly jurisdictions, that it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But like we all know that the States is not particularly friendly for tokens or anything regarding like DAOs or what might potentially be securities. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so this is usually what like the majority of DAO proposal processes sort of look like. Like I mentioned before, many of them use Discourse, which is a sort of like a forum plugin. If you're like familiar with like BB forums, Discourse is just sort of like an alternate, newer version of that. People are able to sort of post up like ideas or things that they want funding for, proposals. They have to have like big formal write-ups. Oftentimes people aren't looking at it too closely. I know some folks are probably familiar with the Uniswap proposal that just sort of proposed that they paid schools like a bunch of money for very ill-defined returns. Yeah, so yeah, so usually the initial things that are put to vote on a snapshot have to reach consensus or like interest on like the discourse forum first. Yeah. So it's not so it's a website, and if you're interested in proposing something in the BitDAO discourse, you can just go to our website, and we have a link to our discourse like in the top bar. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that this might not be like the best solution for the problem at hand, right? Because you're effectively shorting whatever token that you've put into the bond in return for like the rewards token. But it's a step towards sort of improving what is sort of a very uninvolved proposal process, right? An issue that we've seen facing us the majority of the time is that proposals are sort of pushed through by insiders. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the Solend drama that's going on right now, where initially the vote was like 94%. You know, we don't want to take this liquidation and do it OTC, right? And then, you know, some folks stepped in with a lot of insider tokens, and one guy voted, and it suddenly got pushed to, oh, hey, we're actually going to be liquidating it OTC. We think that putting up things like this sort of incentivizes the community to come together and vote more, and it has them put more stake in the game, and it allows them to be on a more equal footing as folks that are sort of able to like post like end collateral like sort of all by themselves. We're sort of also looking for more tooling along those lines that sort of makes the proposal process more engaging and more accessible to community members sort of overall. We actually do have a prize available sort of today. I'm going to pull it up in our Medium. Oh my God. Where we're looking for like more ideas for how we can improve our proposal process from what we have today. So we're offering about like $10,000 in prizes. We have sort of two tracks with this. We have DAO treasury deployment. So basically, we found that large DAO treasuries have to be managed like really conservatively to avoid like principal loss through like systemic failure. For example, you put like all your money into some yield farm, and that yield farm gets hacked, right? or like Oracle misfires, or like other mechanical exploits, right? And we're basically looking for solutions, or like, which can be tooling, visualization dashboards, operating structures, and so on and so forth, that would help allow DAOs to help deploy their treasuries at size for yield. So for example, like something like that you could build could be like a Gnosis safe module that allows sort of like whitelisting and passive deployment of treasury assets to like blue chip yield farms, or like collateralized or margin loans that people could take out from the DAO treasury for some sort of interest. Track 2, which sort of fits more into line with the little presentation that we had today, is trying to improve the DAO proposal process. Sort of like I mentioned before, again, the majority of DAO proposals are created like in private, right? And the initial version that's been proposed on the forum itself has already been like reviewed by core stakeholders and insiders, and generally, like we already know it's going to be pushed through the moment it's been posted on the forum. Yeah, it's not great. This process can take like many, many months, and it's usually unpaid, and so people aren't really incentivized to do this unless they already have like a large stake within the DAO itself, leading to sort of like insider conclusion on these DAO proposals. We want to be able to find a way to like leverage a wider range of community contributions for ideas and development without them having to go through this process. And that's just not something that's happening with like the current DAO status quo. And we're just looking for solutions to try to incentivize the construction of DAO proposals in like a public way, right? Whether it be through like community participation in like bonds, whether it be through community participation in like open ideation on what exactly the proposal contents are, and with DAO members being able to signal that they're opposed to certain parts of it in a very explicit and formalized way. Yeah, so it's definitely beneficial. This could be definitely beneficial to the ideation process in terms of like DAO rebrandings, in terms of like protocol functionality upgrades, protocol parameter changes, and like sort of many other aspects that many DAOs have their users sort of vote on chain on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, so if you're interested or you have any ideas for what you could sort of build for either of these tracks, I'm happy to like meet you at the BitDAO booth and chat a little bit more. And yeah, thank you, I guess, for coming to the talk today. It's 5:30 exactly. Yeah.